It's very mechanical. If you get a job doing anything locally to like cars, usually you may have to animate something with the cars. It may be like the wheels spinning, it might be the steering wheel moving, it might be the doors opening, but it could be more complex, like the seats kind of like folding into itself. There's a lot of mechanics that go into making sure all the pivots are in the right spot. It could be, I had a student before who had to do, what's it called? Convertible top. This was like his first job when he started working, was he had to animate a convertible top. And if you've ever looked at a convertible top, there's actually like a lot of hinges and a lot of mechanics that go into making it look correct. Oops. You can see all the different pieces here, all the different contraption pieces that go into this. Rigging, for me, I think it's kind of like one of the fun things about animating, because you really get to understand the mechanics of how things work and understand how things are built. There's a whole bunch of books too. Usually these rigging books are going to be more for human. So things like this, or like that, or like these. The human ones are the harder ones because there's so much stuff that goes into it. Things like mechanical stuff is actually a little bit easier to do. The biggest thing is just understanding how rigs work, understanding how mechanics work. Oops, I typed the right thing. Understanding mechanics. I think that was it. There we go. Complicated mechanisms explained with animations. So these are just like one of the web pages you may go to if you're looking for this to understand how things work. So that didn't make it bigger at all. This doesn't either. There it goes. Okay. So like, how do all these pistons move? You can see that there's pivots at each of these spots. So like right here, there's a pivot point, and then right here is another pivot point, and then this whole contraption is kind of like spins around, and that's what makes all those pistons move. Down here, this is pretty cool. I actually have a wooden block in my office that does this exact thing. I don't know why this is going slow all of a sudden. Because I have two open. Close that one. Okay. There we go. So it's pretty cool how this basically is just going back and forth, but this thing is going in a circular form, which is pretty neat. And then this is always something cool. If you're a nerdy like me, it's how a sewing machine actually sews stuff together. I always wondered, like, how does that work? Like the threads here and there, and like how does it actually like stitch stuff together? There you go. This one's pretty neat too. So this thing's spinning, and every time this spins around once, this spins around a quarter or a sixth of a time. And here's some more stuff. This is how a transmission works. Here's another kind of cool gear. I don't know what that is. Here's another gear. Okay. Strangely satisfying, yes. I'm addicted to those videos. All right. So that's where the rigging part comes in. So we have to understand how something's supposed to move so that we can rig it so that it makes it easier to animate. Because that's the end goal, is that it makes it easier for us to animate. So this guy here, if we look at him, let's just break down what he has. He has this on top of him, and these are helicopter blades. So what should happen is we should be able to rotate this like that-ish, okay? And then all four of them will come up, and then we should be able to obviously spin this around. Now the other part of this is that all of this stuff should be able to fit right inside here so that he can basically close off. Now when I modeled him, it took some time to obviously put the stuff in there and make sure that it would all fit. If you look at the direction of this though, you'll see that this is impossible. This pole is just kind of floating in there, so we obviously wouldn't want to show that. And if it came straight down into this, it would actually hit where the lens is at. So there is some stuff where this obviously wouldn't 100% work, but for our viewer, as long as they don't see that area, we should be good, right? For the arm area here, there's a shoulder joint which is right here. There's a bicep, there's an elbow, there's a forearm, and then there are fingers. And if I zoom in on the fingers, you'll see there's even these little joints right here that these things would rotate, and then these things should obviously bend into it, okay? Now this cap, the idea with this is that the arm should be able to fold into itself like that, and then the whole thing be able to wedge itself into the mechanism. So when we're done, we basically have, like the modeling class, a Pokeball with a lens on it, okay? That could also, we hit a couple buttons and then the arms come out, the helicopter thing comes out, and then we could start to move around the hands. And then some other stuff, we have the lens right here, and the lens has, oops, if I just move this out of the way, the lens has this piece of glass, it has this piece of glass, and then there's a iris blade inside here, and that iris blade, if I go and select the pieces in my outliner, I should be able to, let me hide these first. I should be able to grab my rotate and rotate this to open and close the lens, okay? Now, in order to do an animation on this guy, if you think about our Pokeball or our bouncing ball, you think about the building, you think about the stick, there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's a lot of pieces of geometry that come into play. So it's very unlikely that we would ever want to just grab random pieces and just start keyframing them, because it would just be like way too much work. So I'm going to reopen my guy so he's back to where he started. Yes, you may get an error when it starts up, just ignore that error. Okay. There's also another layer on here called extra lens. So if I just turn off my Pokeball and I turn on my extra lens, oops, if I hide these things again, hide that, and then I turn my extra lens, there's this other lens inside here too. So that's something that if you wanted to add that feature in later, you could actually add a control to turn this lens on instead of the other lens, okay? So that's something you could add to yours if you wanted. Come on, there we go. All right. What else? All right, that should be good. Okay. So this thing here, this is going to come basically straight out. After it comes straight out, then the blades will be able to fan outward, and then this thing should be able to spin around. I don't anticipate being able to take this and rotate this thing sideways like this. That doesn't seem like a control that I really need to have. I think I want to keep it just perfectly straight, and maybe like there's a weight somewhere inside him that we don't see that controls how far he moves left and right. Okay. So we're going to start off with this animation here, or this rig. So open to Illustrator. So you don't need to do this part right now. This is something you could add in later. But typically when you look at a rig, you look at the rig for the stick, you look at the rig for the building. We had controls that we would click on, and those controls allowed us to manipulate different pieces of those animations or different pieces of the model. So for the building, it was basically circles. There were circles all over the place. And the circles are nice because it's obviously you grab the circle, you can control stuff. But the one in the stick was a lot nicer because you could actually see, oh, I get it. I can only rotate this one, or I can only move it back and forth. So there's certain icons that you can build that will definitely help make your rig more readable. There we go. So I'm going to go into Illustrator just so you can see how to build a shape, and then you can use that if you want to. You can go into Illustrator at some point, make one for yourself, and then bring it into Maya. I hate this. Every time. They need to get rid of this transparent background. Okay, so anything you draw inside Illustrator will just come right into Maya. You just have to save it a specific way. So the easiest way to find something is to wait for Illustrator to fully load. There we go. And then we go to type, we insert special characters. Where are my glyphs? Oh, to go to my type first. There we go. Then go to type. Then go to insert special characters, symbol. I thought they had other ones in here. Hidden characters. All right, no big deal. I will use my character map. There we go. So if you've never used character map before, it's basically like every single character that each font has. So you could look through this and try to find something that you may want to use. So let's say that's kind of neat there. Okay, so I'm going to say select this one and copy it. So now when I go in here and I just paste it and I make the font like really, really big, it doesn't show up. What font did I have in there? It was Arial. There we go. I don't know why I didn't copy the font. So I changed it to Arial Bold. That was the font that was there. There's my image. Okay. So now I'm going to take my type and just create outlines. So now I have this as an outline shape. I don't want to have separate shapes. So like this circle in the middle, I don't really want that. Oops. So I need to delete the circle in the middle. All right, and everything else here should be good. Part of this won't come in correctly, but that's fine. I'll just crop it when I get in there. Okay. So I'm going to save this as, and I'm going to put it inside my folder. P drive 2540. It's actually in 20 as I put it. And I'm going to save this as rig logo. Now here's the part that you have to make sure you check. Illustrator 8 is currently the only path that will go into Maya. Okay. So if you tried Illustrator CC, it would say no go. If you tried anything else except for Illustrator 8, it would say it doesn't know what it is. And this is true for other programs, like if you go to Cinema with your paths, or you go to After Effects with your paths, sometimes it won't read Illustrator CC. So Illustrator 8 is the best way to do that. All right. So now inside of Maya, I can just say create Illustrator object. I tell it that I only want to bring the curves in, and then I go and find my image. Okay. So it brings in my artboard, which is here. I can delete that. It brings in my main board. I can delete that. And then it brings in my logo. So you can see how it didn't bring in, like, it brought in the whole logo, but then these are like pieces. So I don't need all of these. I can just delete that. Okay. This makes it more difficult to select. So that's all I need is right there. So I can center pivot this, modify, center pivot, and then I can move this into place. Okay. So modify center pivot is something that we're going to be using a lot, especially because in order for us to move something or rotate something correctly, we need to make sure that the pivot is in the right spot. If I grab this and rotate it, you can see the pivot's totally in the wrong spot for animating it. All right. The next thing I want to do is make sure that this is kind of in a spot that makes sense. I also need to look at to see, do I want to control everything with this one control, or do I want to do other stuff with it, right? So with this one control, I could actually set up multiple things. So I could have this thing control this coming up and the wings coming out and then spinning around and animating. I wouldn't have the arms controlled by that, but I may have some other stuff controlled by it. I could have the lens or the iris also controlled by this, and I could have the position of this also controlled by this one object. Okay, so as many things I could bunch into that one control. The least amount of controls you have sometimes is the better, because then you can really basically grab one thing like a remote control and control a bunch of stuff from it. So I'm just going to go to my top view and just center this a bit better. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but I definitely want this to be a little bit more centered. So I'm just kind of scaling it down so that I can see the little things poking out. Should be good enough. All right. Okay, so I'm going to use this as my controller to open this up and move it. When we animate stuff, we always want to be able to get back to our default pose. So let's say that I accidentally took this and moved it way down here. In order for me to get it back, I have to go back to my top view, back to my move tool, and maybe it's right on and maybe it's not. So I'm going to go to modify and I'm going to freeze transform. And if you watch these over here, when I freeze the transform, they all go to zeros and ones, but he stays perfectly right there. So that way, in case I do screw up and move it, I just have to reset this to 0, and now he goes back to where he was. Okay? So we want to have basically everything has a reset. Everything has a way to get back to that. So far, modify center pivot we're going to use a lot, and then modify freeze transform we'll also use a lot. Okay? So I need to have these things rotate upwards. That's one of the controls that they need to have. In order for them to rotate upwards, I need to make sure that their pivots are in the right spot. So the other tool we're going to use is D, which is the pivot tool. Okay. Now before I do that, I'm going to look and see where the pivot is. If I go to my top view and look, you'll see that the pivot is nowhere near where it should be rotating from. It might be hard to see, but there's a bar right there. That's about where it should be pivoting from. Okay. So I need to move it to the right, and I also need to move this up. All right. So a quick way to do those two steps is I'm going to grab all 4 of these, and I'm just going to go to Modify and Center Pivot it. Okay, so that just takes the pivot and just puts it basically centered in this item. Because I'm going to spin it from the center of it, it just makes more sense as long as it's as far as left and right this way, it's there. Then I can hit D and just move the arrow up. And this is going to move where it's pivoting from. So as it opens, it should open from there. I hit D again. Now I can click this and rotate it. And you can see how now it's rotating right from that tip. You always want to test your stuff out ahead of time. You don't want to go into the rigging part until you know this is how it's supposed to work. The other thing I'm kind of looking at is over here on my rotates. You'll notice that all of these have already been frozen, okay? And it's very important because, again, I want to have a spot that it goes back to. I don't want to have something where it's just like this is at 15 and this is at 12 and then this is some crazy angle, okay? And as I rotate this, it's only rotating one of these. It's only moving one of those. All right, that's perfect. Okay, so that's those guys. That should be good there. Okay, so those should all pivot from the right spot. Now what I need to do is start to group stuff, okay? These things are going to come out, and then they're going to start rotating in a circle, but this whole thing is going to start rotating in a circle. So what I need to do is start grouping stuff so that they rotate together, so that as I grab these pieces here, and I try to rotate them, that they all rotate basically like a helicopter should. So I'm going to grab these things, and I'm going to shift click this guy. Okay, each one of them have their own little gear. I'm going to shift click the little rod. I'm going to shift click the rod and hit P. Grab this one, shift click the rod, hit P. You always grab the child first, shift click the parent, and then hit P. And what that means is when I grab the rod, it'll actually allow me to rotate it from the rod if I needed to. So now if I click the rod, look at how much easier this is to rotate, because now it's rotating exactly from where the rod is, because it's using the rod's pivot. So I didn't actually need to grab this and move the pivot for this, because this object has its own pivot, but the rod here has its pivot that I would actually want to use more. Okay? So that's why those rods are there. So I showed how you can do the pivot. You don't need to do the pivot for these because we're going to be using the rod's pivot for that. Okay? And then each one of these rods is going to get parented to this clip. So I hit P for that. This clip gets parented to the cap, P. The cap gets parented to the pole, hit P. Okay? So by the time I'm done, this whole area should have one thing. If I click on the rod and I move it, it grabs everything. If I need to reset it, I can zero it out and it puts it right back where it should be. Okay? So now I can go through and actually set up my controls for this thing to come up and start spinning. All right? So if I click on this, I have translates, rotates, and scales. I'm not going to really use a scale for this. I'm going to keep his scale the same that it always is. You can kind of configure that into your rig. but I don't really need that. So if I highlight these, I can right click and say hide selected, and those just go away. That way I don't have to see the scale. I don't have to worry about accidentally scaling something or not. All right, so now what I need to do is I'm going to make my own attributes. So under modify, here's another one that you're going to use, add attributes. Okay, so modify add attributes will allow me to take whatever I want here, give it a name, and it'll add something right there. So just like the mech one that we did, the building one, how you had those little sliders off to the right that said stairs out and ramp out and whatever else, that's how I created each one. So I give it a name. So this is going to be heli up. I name stuff lowercase for the first word and then uppercase for each first letter of each additional word. Okay, that's called camel case. Just so you can get an idea of what that is. Let me go to WordPad. So if I'm typing my name, I would type in Sean Sarcona like that. If I'm typing I like butter, I would type I like butter like that. And you see the first word is always lowercase for the first letter, and then each additional word is uppercase for each first letter. Okay. Confusing, but that's the way it works. All right, close that. And that'll come in for this naming stuff over here of why I'm doing that. Now, before I name this heli up, what's going to happen is when I create it, it's going to put it right under the word visibility. So now my own custom controls are going to be kind of clustered in with the default bunch. So I'm going to put a couple underscores first and then just say add. And you'll see what it does. It just creates a little separator, just so that I know and whoever else knows that these are the default ones and then I have my own. Okay, so I can go to heli up. Actually, I'm calling it heli up and out. And let's see. This is the kind of number that I'm dealing with. So on some of these, I may have something like an on-off switch, right? So I may want something just to turn on or turn off like a light. I may have some things that I want to choose from a list. Is it red? Is it blue? Is it green? Is it yellow? I may have something where I need a specific number, like a whole number, like 1 or 8 or 17. I may have something where I need 3 digits of a number, like a vector number, okay? For most of the stuff you're going to do for this, you're going to use a float. A float is basically any negative number or positive number, okay? And it can be a decimal point. So I could do like 5.87321 blast off. And then I need to set a minimum and a maximum. So my minimum is going to be 0, okay? My helicopter is in its base. That's where it's at 0. My maximum, I'm going to set this to 10. It's going to be up and the blades will be out. Okay, so those will be my two controls. Is at 0, it's inside the base. At 10, the thing is out and the blades are spun out or lifted out. So I hit OK. So now this does nothing right now. Okay, if I click and drag, you'll see it does nothing. Maya has no idea what that's supposed to do. All it knows is we've called it heli up and out. Okay, so I need to actually start to connect it to this. So I'm going to take the pole and I'm just going to put it inside here. Oops. And I need to grab it again. I just want to make sure that it's nice and even with the top. We're pretty close. There we go. That's pretty close. Okay. So now I'm going to use a rigging tool. Okay, there's a bunch of rigging tools. I'm going to go over probably the most difficult one first, and then we'll get into the more simple ones for other stuff. So I'm going to grab my outliner. Yeah, take this. And you see my outliner. This is I forgot about this. Whenever you import an Illustrator object, it puts it like in a group, in a group, in a group. So if I click on this and I just hit Shift P, it'll pull it out of the group, and then I can just delete that stuff. There we go. Just don't need the extra junk there. All right, so now if I open up my Pokeball, there's the heli pole. Okay, so I need to control the translate Y of this heli pole so that it lifts up. So I'm going to go and click on translate Y. I'm going to go to edit, and I'm going to say set driven key. Okay, now like I said, this is probably one of the most complex methods to rig something, but it's also the best because you can do like 10 times more things with this than you can with any other tool that's there. So the way this works is you have a driver and you have a driven. The driver is what is controlling something else, right? So we have a light switch. We click the light switch, and what happens to these overhead lights? They turn on, right? That's what happens. We hit the switch, the lights hopefully turn on, okay? That's the driver. The lights are the driven, okay? So my driver in this case would be what? What's going to be my controlling object? The curve, right? This thing right here is going to be my controlling object. So I click on this and I say load driver. Now what's going to be controlled? What switch? The pole. Right. No, not talking about lights anymore. Okay, so I grab the heli pole and I say load driven. Okay. Now I have the object and I have the object loaded, but it doesn't know what's actually controlling what. So when we click, now we're going to talk about the light switch. When we click the light switch up, how does it know to give electricity to these coils inside there, right? We have specific attributes that it's driving in it, right? So same kind of thing. We have to tell it this curve, what part of that curve is going to control what part of this heli pole. So we know that the curves, heli up and out, is going to control the heli poles translate Y. Okay? So basically when we go over to that control and we start playing with it, as we take that value up, it's going to lift that heli pole up. And as we take it even further, then it'll actually fan out those blades, but one thing at a time. Okay, so right now, the heli up and out is at 0. This thing is inside its cave. Perfect. That's where we want it. When the heli pole or the heli up and out is at 0, that's where I want this to be. So I'm going to say set a key. Now when this is at, let's say 6, I want the heli pole to be up. Okay? And if I reset this to 0, that'll get me right back to where it should be. So now this bottom thing is at 6, this pole is at 0. Now I can say set a key. Okay, so I've set 2 keys, just like when we animate something. Here's my start point, here's my end point. Now Maya can go between them and figure out what's supposed to happen. So I grab this, and there it goes. Okay, now let's set up the blades to spin out. Okay, so now what should be controlled with the blades? The top, right? So we want to go in here and grab these little rods. Okay, so I'm going to grab each one of those rods, and those are going to be my new driven. Okay, grab these. Now, which attribute is going to be driven? What's going to be controlled? The rotate, right? So if I rotate this in the Z direction, do you see how that goes this way? Each one of these is going to have a different direction probably that they're going to rotate. So when I rotate this one, it's going to go in the negative Z. When I grab this one, it's going to go in the positive X. Okay? So for this one, we're actually going to be controlling for each one of those 2 different things, either X or Z. I already know that Y isn't one of them. Okay? So if I click on X, I hold control and I say Z, then I should be good. Now if I click on my curve, I want to make sure that this thing is already out, okay, or at least on its way out. So I know that at 6, it's fully out because that's what I said. I said 0, you're in the box, 6, you're outside. So if I scoot this down to like 5, you'll see he's still outside. If I go to 4, okay, 4 is probably way too soon to even try to open that up, okay? So if I set this to 5, he's outside of that, and that's probably a good time to have a little bit of overlap. As it's coming out, the blades start opening, instead of it comes out and stops, and then the blades open, right? So I'm going to set that to 5. These things are still docked. I'm going to hit key. Then I set this to 10. And when this is at 10, then I can grab each one of these and open it up. Okay, now however far I go on one, I want to go the same distance on the other ones. So just to keep this nice and even, I'm just going to say -72. I'll go to the next one. I'll start rotating it. And I'll say, okay, it's going to go to 72 in this case because it's in this other direction. I'll grab the next one, rotate that. 72 in the X this time. Go to this one, rotate that. -72 in the Z. Okay, I have to make sure these are all selected still. The X and Z are selected, and I hit key. So now if we check this out, I grab this. Gorgeous, right? All right, cool. So now let's see if we can get it to spin. So if I click on the pole, that's what should control everything, because if I grab that, then I could just animate this thing spinning. So there's several different ways that we could do spinning, okay? I need a new attribute, right? So I need to go to my curve, which we should probably name. Let's call this PokeController. PokeController, no Poke. There we go. All right. So how do I add another attribute to this thing? Modify, add attribute. Okay. Also notice there's an edit in case you spelled something wrong. There's also a delete in case you added something wrong. So we go to add, and we'll call this one prop spinning. Prop spin. This is going to be a float because again, it's any positive, negative number. We'll start it off at 0 and we'll go up to, let's say, 5. Okay. There it is. It didn't load. I had to reselect it and then it loaded. Okay. So now for something like this set driven may not be the best tool for that. Okay. I'll show you how I can do it with set driven, then I'll take it off. So I'm going to say, let's go here. Oops. I have to reload this. Click this and load my driver. Prop spin. There we go. That's going to control this thing. So I'll load that as the driven. The Y is going to be what spins. Okay. So prop spin is going to control the rotate Y. When the PokeController's prop spin is at 0, there's no spinning. So I hit key. When this is at 5, which is what I set the top one to, let's just say I grab this and I just spin it around like crazy. Perfect. Set key. Okay. So now if I go here and I go to my prop spin, here's 0 and there's 5. Okay. So that's all it's doing. Now it doesn't look like it's spinning very much, but because of how far it's spinning, it's basically spinning around like faster than we can see it spin. If I turned on motion blur, which let me just save this as so it doesn't crap out of me. There we go. I'm going to turn on the motion blur right here and then go to my prop spin. And I'm just going to set a key at 1 and I'll go up to, let's say, 100 and set a key at 5. There we go. So now you can see that we actually have a little bit of motion blur on here because the thing is spinning so fast. Gorgeous. Okay. Now here's the problem though, is that sometimes I may want to control the speed of how fast it's spinning. I may want to go super fast or I may want to go super slow. So there's other ways that we can do that allow me to basically just be able to hit the play button and control how fast this thing is moving. Okay. So I'm going to right click on my attribute and just delete the keyframes. I'm going to go to my heli pole. I'm going to click on the rotate Y, right click and break the connection. Okay. So now this doesn't control the other one. Okay. So this does nothing again. So what I'm going to do is go to this thing, and I'm going to show you the second hardest thing that you have to do, which is expressions. Okay, so under Edit, I go to Expressions, and what these are basically like mini little scripts that allow us to control different items. And this is, the set driven is great because you can literally specify at this point do this, at this point do this, and at this point do that. The expressions are great because I can set something up that will work forever. Okay. So the way this works is that I specify a name of an object, I put a dot, and then I put the name of the attribute. Okay. That way Maya will know this is the object, here's the attribute. I have my light switch as my name, and the attribute would be, let's say, light switch 1 or light switch 2 or on and off, or however we're going to call it. Okay. So for this, I need to specify my heli pole. So I'm going to say heli pole dot rotate y. I have to make sure that my case is exactly the same. So if one is uppercase, the other one has to be uppercase. If one is lowercase, the other one has to be lowercase. Maya names its stuff the same way that I named mine. So it will always do lowercase, uppercase, lowercase, uppercase. Okay? So if you get in the habit of doing that, it'll just make your life a little bit easier. So I'm going to say the heli poles rotate y equals the Poke controllers. I forgot what I even called that. Let me copy this and then select that. Every time you select something new, it erases what you wrote. Let's paste it in there, Poke controller dot prop spin. Okay, I can see the name of it here. I can see the prop spin. Most people, when this doesn't work, what happens is you've typed something wrong. You put in an extra letter, you didn't capitalize something, whatever. Okay, so I'm basically just using super duper simple math. This equals this. So when Poke controller equals 5, the other one will equal 5. Yes, ma'am. It is, yes. So Maya has several levels of coding. One of them is Python, one of them is Mel, and then this is the other one, which is expressions. We're using it for rigging. When we get to the point of downloading rigs, you'll see they're like loaded with expressions all over the place. So this is just going to be an equal relationship. So I hit create. I didn't get an error. This thing down here didn't turn bright red, so that means it worked. So now if I go to my prop spin and I change it from 0 to 5, you'll see that my propeller is spinning like that. Okay, it's only going 5 degrees. That's all. 5 degrees, 0 degrees, 5 degrees, 0 degrees. So what I can do with this is, stop that, is I can use other types of math to control how fast it's going to go. So let's say that I took this and I multiplied it by 20. I was going to say 30, but I typed 20. I hit the edit key, that changes it, or updates it. So now you'll see that it's going to spin a lot more. Okay, pretty sweet. Now let's say, stop. Stupid Windows. I did 60, we would get the similar results, right? Not the same results, but similar results. Just minimize you out of the way, squish you in here, yeah, whatever. Okay, so now it's going to move 60 for every one number that it moves here. Okay, now here's where we can get fancy with it, because Maya has other things inside of it that we can borrow. So one of them is frame. Okay, so frame is just like, what frame are you on? So what this is going to do now is it's going to take this number here, 0, and it's going to multiply it times whatever frame we're on. So if we're on frame 5, 5 times 0 is 0. Right? We're on frame 50, 5 times 50, 250. Okay? Now what's neat about that is what that means is every frame we're basically moving up 5 units, right? So gradually we're getting more and more speed. So if we rewind this and we hit play, okay, nothing happens because there's no, this is still 0. And then as I take this up to, let's say, 5, you'll see that gradually it's going to get more and more speedy, okay? Not more and more speedy, but just higher and higher. Oops, that's the wrong one. Go down. Okay. So for right now, I'm just throwing a simple expression. We'll get to a more complex one as we get into this. I don't want to throw too much math, but I just want you to see how that could work. But then you could also multiply this times like 10 if you wanted to. And so now for every frame, it's going to move up 10 plus the 5 that we already have here. So now it's really going fast. And if I want this to go slower, I can just set this number down. Right? So if he's coming in for a landing, he doesn't just turn it off, he actually slows down. And it's off. And we go to 5 again. Okay? So we'll get, oops. We'll get more into more complex expression as we go. I just want you to see that type of thing for now. Okay? So for the most part, this thing is all set up. I can retract this. I can make the prop spin. I can even make it spin while it's inside there. How's that happening? I'm going to look at that. That's weird. Should not be doing that inside. What are you doing? Those are both 0. I think it's just a glitch in Maya. That happens often. All right, just ignore that. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. Oh, it's just permanently there. That is out. Graph editor lets me see everything. Let's rotate X. Rotate Z. You should be good. I don't see anything weird. But it would show up here, and it's not showing up there, though. All right, I'll have to look at that and see. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I'm not perfect. I'm sorry. All right, so that's that part. Now, the other stuff that we could do for this is I'm going to set up my iris control on here too. So I'll go to modify, I'll add an attribute, iris close. Okay, it's already open, so we don't need to open it anymore. 0, 10, and 0. These numbers are pretty arbitrary. You can literally put in anything you want. I could put in -7 and 18. But if you go from 0 to 10 on pretty much everything, you know the range, right? I've seen some that go 0 to 100, and it's too big of a range for what we're doing. Okay, so 0 to 10 for now is good. I'm going to just throw these onto an extra layer just so I can see my stuff. So I'm just grabbing these, right-clicking on the layer, and then hiding it. Now I can see that. And now I can go to this and go to my outliner. And I need to go to the iris so I can grab all these pieces. Okay? And I'm going to test out to see which direction they need to go. So it looks like it's going to go in Z. So I'm going to click on Rotate Z, Edit, Set Driven. There we go. My driver will be this guy. Iris close. Okay, so iris close should be at 0, which it is. I set a key. Then I grab all of my iris pieces, just rotate it to close it. It's good. And I set another key. And that's it. Oh man, I forgot to set this. No big deal. I set that back to 10, and I set a key. Set this back to 0. Set that back to 0. There we go. So now if we look, okay, and the important thing is we don't have to touch any of the stuff, which is ideal. It's very easy when you're animating something to accidentally go, oops, and now it's off, and now it doesn't work. Okay, so if you ever mess up your set driven like I did, don't freak out about it. Just go back and say, okay, at 0, this is what it's supposed to look like. And at 10, this is what it's supposed to look like. And you just reset those keys, and Maya will just overwrite each time you do that. And if you have other stuff that's going on, everything does show up inside the graph editor. So here's that animation right inside here. So sometimes I'll go through and I'll just linearize everything just by clicking on these and hitting the linear button so that it doesn't try to like ease in and ease out, because sometimes that looks weird, especially for mechanical stuff like a lens opening and closing. Okay, so now this is just a start of the whole rigging process. Next week I'll go into doing the arms. This is more stuff that is, let me save my stuff again. This is more stuff that's just a bit more complex. We have to create some other controls, and we have to compensate for some of our stuff. Like, just so you can see it, as this thing rotates to a close, where was it? Oh, this thing. As this rotates closed, you can see that this actually like sticks out. Okay, so I actually have to create a control that allows me to control this separate from the other stuff. Okay. No, this would move with that, because otherwise I couldn't open up this further than that. So they both have to move together. Right, right. It can't go this way, so I have to have it go this way partly, or whatever that goes in, and then this is going to stay kind of on the outside and be able to like wiggle a little bit. Okay, so we'll have other controls for doing that kind of stuff. All right, so if you get a chance, start rigging this thing, because next week we're just going to keep working on this guy's rig. We'll do the arms, and then we'll do a little animation for it. And if you feel like it, all of his UVs are laid out. Okay, so for your animation, you want to add a texture to them, you definitely can add a texture to him.